My name is Dave Morrow. 9 months of each year, I live out of my vehicle. I travel the wilderness by foot on an endless backpacking and landscape photography trip. I want to teach and share the photography and outdoor skills that I use on these trips. I don't want to spend hours editing video or sitting in front of a computer, so I made some rules. First, everything's shot on GoPro. This was the best way I found to record quickly on a consistent basis. Second, I can only spend 20 minutes editing each video. So thanks for watching, and welcome to the Landscape Photography Journals.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? So in today's video, I want to discuss the specific camera gear I use and kind of the thoughts that I put into buying camera gear. So before I get into the gear video where I'll talk about the technicalities, I want to tell you guys that I only own 4 pieces of camera gear total. I own a tripod, 2 lenses, and a camera body. So instead of spending all my time tracking or researching the latest gear, which I never watch, I would rather spend my time learning new camera techniques and things such as skills that will carry on from camera to camera. And I think by investing all my time there, instead of watching for specific new technologies, that I can exponentially increase the quality of my photos over time. I can also travel to more places and overall get a better understanding of photography. So that's the reason I don't really care about gear. Now that being said, I do have a really good full frame camera, which is a Nikon D810. I have a really good tripod, and I have 2 good lenses. So I think there is something to be said from jumping from, say, a crop sensor camera to a full frame camera. If you're shooting landscapes, that can completely change your game as far as image quality. A lot of people say gear doesn't matter. When it comes to landscape photography, gear completely matters, but skills also matter. So you kind of need to combine both. But once you have the good gear, stop listening to all the static noise of new cameras coming out all the time and spend all that time devoting to improving your own skills in photography, and that will help you out a lot more in the long run. But that being said, I'm going to show you guys the gear I use, and I'm going to switch from this soaking wet environment to one of the driest environments on earth. So I'll see you guys in a second. A lot of people are sponsored by camera brands. When you get a sponsorship from a camera brand, you're almost, although getting free gear, you're kind of having to work for them all the time and say, oh, well, I'm getting this free gear. What do they really want on the back end from me? So instead of doing that, I prefer to go out and shoot all the time. So when camera brands have contacted me, if I want to try their latest camera or I want to be a brand ambassador or whatever, I turn that down because in the end, at least for me, this is my personal goal, but at the end of my life, I wanted to say that I spent all of my time exploring and shooting. And there's already really good cameras out. I'm happy with the current model of camera. I can't imagine how much better they could get. I'm sure they will. But if instead of spending my time shooting and exploring, I'm helping gear brands to build their brand by getting free equipment from them, then I'm not really directing all of my time and energy to what I really love or really want to do. So I'm kind of failing myself there. So these are kind of the different aspects that I look at when gearing up or buying new gear for trips. I'm always going to want to buy it on my own, so I own the gear 100% outright. I don't owe anybody for it. And then after I buy the best gear I can get my hands on, which I've determined I need, I don't go buy new gear all the time. I'll buy gear whenever it wears out, or every 5 or 6 years I'll buy a new camera. And then I'll just keep that old camera as a backup in my vehicle. So hopefully these tips help you guys out. There's no right or wrong way to do this stuff. This is just some of the stuff I've learned over the last 7 years of shooting professional. All right, guys. So all the photography gear I own is right here. Tripod, camera, lenses. So I have 1 tripod I take with me, works for everything. I have 1 camera body that I take with me, and then I have 2 lenses, and that's all. So first I'll talk about the tripod, and then I'll go into the camera and lenses. I used to have an even lighter tripod set than this, but what I noticed was when I would put it down in water to take water shots, or when I would put it in heavy wind, it would shake so much that although it was light and saved me some weight, it didn't get as good or as sharp of images. So I've upgraded to this, which is still a very light tripod setup. So this is the Faisal Tournament carbon fiber, and I'll link all this stuff below the video so you can check it out. But these are only the legs, and it does not include the ball head, which I'll go over here in a second. But two reasons that I really like this tripod setup is that first, it's only got two pieces that extend. So you only have to screw 2 points to extend the legs. My old tripod, I had 4 of these I had to unscrew. And every time I made the tripod bigger or smaller or moved it around, it was just a huge pain. So I looked for a tripod that was tall. This one's about 5.5 feet. And it only had 2 pieces to unscrew as far as the legs go. So that's the first thing I really like about this tripod. The second thing is that there are not many moving parts. There are these telescoping legs, and then there are these pieces that allow you to basically widen the base of those legs. Nothing to break. You can beat these up pretty badly and they'll take a hit. So as far as tripod head goes, these legs are separate from the head. So you have to buy this head separately. Now this is the Really Right Stuff BH25 head. And I really like this head because, first of all, it's very small and low profile. I used to have one of the larger Really Right Stuff heads, and it was just too heavy, too much. So this has 2 screws. One here, which is adjustable, which allows you to rotate the head around, changing your composition, whatever else you need. Then the second screw is just for turning the head on the swivel. That's right there. So very simple, very light. Now the head I have on here takes a Really Right Stuff L bracket, which is attached to my camera, and I'll show you that here in a second. This is my favorite tripod setup that I've ever had. I will probably keep it or continue to buy it if it breaks forever. I have no downsides of this. There's nothing that I could change or improve upon. I think if I made it any lighter, it would just shake around too much. So I'm really happy with this setup. Well worth it. Now, as far as actual camera gear goes with camera, I use this f-stop small ICU. F-stop's just the company. And the ICU is what they call this little unit. Now, it's supposed to fit in their backpacks, but I figured out that they fit very well in backpacking bags as well. So you can see it's got all these little organizers, which you can change around however you like. So now I'll talk about camera. As far as camera goes, I use the Nikon D810 full frame camera. I really like these for landscape photography because they have a metal body, which takes a huge beating. See, this is all glued up because I've smashed it. The edge of this lens is smashed off. The glass is still good, but this stuff takes a big beating. I've also put this underwater accidentally, and it survived after it dried out, so I tested it a lot. So Nikon D810 camera, and you'll notice that on this camera is this little metal L bracket. What these L brackets allow you to do is they allow you to mount your camera directly over the tripod. So a lot of tripods, if you have a regular ball head, when you go vertical, you have to turn your tripod sideways and hang it off the edge. With an L bracket, you mount your camera directly over the center of gravity or the center of your tripod. So it's very easy to move it around, and it doesn't want to shake the tripod all over the place. So L bracket is much more sturdy. You'll get much sharper images. And it also mounts regularly horizontally. So you'll notice that even with this big lens on it, this tripod is very sturdy. And it's a very small tripod, so that's why I really like that setup. So that's the Really Right Stuff L bracket. They just mount to the bottom of the camera. So Nikon D810 camera. This camera is great in my opinion because it has a huge dynamic range, meaning it can pick up very dark detail in the image as well as very bright highlights, and it takes that and compresses it all into one raw file. So you don't have to take a whole lot of images for dynamic range. You don't have to bracket brighter and darker images. This will capture almost any scene in one exposure and definitely in 2 exposures. The other thing I like about it is that it is a 36.6 megapixel full frame camera, meaning the actual size of the pixel, they call that the pixel pitch, is very large. So it does very well capturing light in low light situations. So shooting Milky Way, night sky, twilight, this camera really excels. Now on the front of the camera, I have Nikor's 14 to 24 millimeter f/2.8 lens. So this is the favorite, or what I consider to be my favorite, wide angle lens. It's 14 millimeters, so it's very wide, but you'll notice that it's got this huge bulbous glass on the front of it. And that's because they actually have 12 pieces of glass in here that help to line the light up very easily when it comes into your camera, and that keeps distortion around the outsides of the images from happening. It also keeps your pictures very sharp around the edges. So you might notice if you have a cheaper wide angle lens that it gets very distorted around the edges. Things that are straight in the actual scene will bend up like this. And you might also notice that your camera or your lens does not have pictures that are very sharp around the edges. Well, when you get a really good wide angle such as this, the glass setup and the physics of how they designed it really help it to negate any of those problems. So that's why I really like this lens. It also shoots very well in low light scenarios. So the Nikkor 14 to 24 millimeter, that's what I use. So that's the camera body as well as the lens. Now, I only carry one other lens, and that is Nikkor's 28 to 300 f/3.5 to 5.6. Now you'll notice that when I stated these two lenses, this has two different f-stop values that it gives. This only has one f-stop value that it gives. That means that no matter what range of focal lengths I shoot with this lens, from 14 all the way to 24 millimeters, it can hold f/2.8 for all of those ranges. Normally really expensive wide angles have that feature. When you get into a little bit cheaper lenses like this one, you'll notice that at 28 millimeters, it will shoot at f/3.5, but when you zoom in to 300 millimeters, the minimum aperture value goes to f/5.6. So it has a changing f-stop depending on your zoom range. So I like this lens because it is covering a broad range of focal lengths from 28 all the way to 300 millimeters. You notice this was from 24 millimeters maximum, so I covered 14 to 24 with this, and then I only skip 25, 26, 27, and then I'm at this, all the way to 300. So I've covered a broad range of focal lengths with two lenses. Now, on this lens I carry circular polarizer, which helps to negate any bad or harsh light rays in the scene. There are other lenses you could get, such as the 24 to 70 and then the 70 to 200, which are much better lenses than this. They're just not as versatile. So I think this lens performs 95% as well with half the weight and half the number of lenses. So I opted to go with this instead of two larger lenses, which obviously I couldn't fit in there. So you kind of have to look at your special use case for what you need these lenses to do. And then from there, you can kind of decide what you need. But always err on the side of having less. And then if you decide down the road you need more, or you're really lacking in a certain area of gear, you can pick up more. It's always a bad habit to go buy a bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily need, and then you're just dragging it around with you everywhere and using a few of those things hardly ever. So that's why I went with this option. So Nikon D810, Nikkor 14 to 24, and Nikkor 28 to 300. That's my lens selection. Now, I also carry a few other things in this bag. I carry a battery for each day of shooting. So on a long trip like this, I'll carry 6 batteries. And that seems to hold me. A lot of people would wonder, well, why don't you just carry a solar charger? Well, my thing with that is that anything that you have to depend on to charge stuff is, first of all, extra weight. So if I had 2 batteries and carried a solar charger, the solar charger is much heavier than these extra 4 batteries that I carry around. So I just like to keep it simple and carry the batteries. The second thing is that I always know that these batteries, if they're charged up, they're going to hold that charge. There's a lot higher chance that a solar charger or something like that could break. Now, the only time I would consider carrying a solar charger is on a trip where I'm not going to see any battery charge or power for at least like 15 days at a time. I'd rather carry 15 of these, which I have done before, than have to depend on any outside source of power. So batteries are the first thing I carry. I also carry this little plastic bag. I put my memory cards in this little plastic bag, which I'll talk off in a second. But why I also keep this is because when a battery dies from my camera, I'll put the dead batteries into this plastic bag. So then I'm never guessing if I'm grabbing a charged battery or a dead battery. Also in the plastic bag are these little lens cloths. Now these are paper lens cloths. So you can use these to wipe off rain or anything else, but they also help to suck up any humidity that might get in this bag. So they keep my memory cards good. They also keep these batteries that are dead in here from getting moisture in them. So that's kind of like a dual purpose use for these little pieces of paper. Now, as far as memory cards go, I carry CF cards, which are these big guys. And then I carry SD cards, which are these small guys. And I carry both of these in the camera at once. So this camera can actually shoot to the CF card, which is the bigger, faster write speed card. And then it will automatically back up that picture to the SD card. So if one of these cards fails, I always have the backup of the other card waiting in there. So I normally just shoot 32 gigabyte cards. If I shoot like a 64 or a 120 gigabyte card, then if I lose my camera or I smash it somehow or it falls down in a crevasse or whatever else, I lose a whole lot of images, say 800. But shooting with 32 gigabyte cards, I only lose 300 to 400 images maximum. So I'm kind of cutting down on the ways that I could possibly screw myself over and designing fail-safes to make sure that those things don't happen. So those are my cards, and on a trip I'll carry, I don't know, 64 gigabytes of total storage. I shoot pretty selectively, so I don't need a whole lot. So I put those in there. And I also have this actual cloth lens wipe. So after you wipe rain off or whatever else you may need with one of those paper wipes, this is like the final wipe down. So this is something when I'm actually shooting, I just carry in my pocket all the time. It's just a really soft cloth material. So that's the extent of my photography gear.